And there we go. All right. So, like I said, Gilded Age, this is the intro. I'm going to give you more information on the term Gilded Age and what that is tomorrow when we finish Expanding West. Are we going to go over the Wild West? Tomorrow. So tomorrow is when we're going to talk about the Wild West. We're going to talk about the natives and some of the Indian Wars, not too much. Like I know Isaac, you asked me about one of the massacres. We're going to talk about it. We're probably going to not get into that much detail, but I might just mention it. We are going to talk about the West, though, and what the Wild West means and what that actually is. So that's tomorrow. Today, we're talking about the economic factors and some of the legislation and, of course, railroads. So let's get into that. The Gilded Age. Again, this is the Gilded Age that we are talking about. Objective, you already got it up there. First key point, railroads. We're going to talk about railroads. Again, I cannot stress enough. We talked about it a bit for the Civil War. Railroads are like the biggest deal of a thing that can be had. In the same way that, like, if you have to go to your grandparents' house, but you don't really want to because they don't have good Wi-Fi or they don't have Wi-Fi at all, you don't want to go to a town that doesn't have a railroad, at least, not during the Gilded Age. So the building of something called the Transcontinental Railroad and the discovery of I can relate to that, and the discovery of mineral resources and government policies protecting economic growth and communities, and government policies. So you have the building of the railroad, discovery of mineral resources. What do I mean when I say mineral resources? Somebody in the chat tell me, or come off mute and tell me. When you see discovery of mineral resources, what are they talking about? They're not talking about Topo Chico. What are they talking about? What does that mean, mineral resources, discovery? And if you don't know, put don't know in chat, but we should know what mineral resources are. So what do we got? What are mineral resources? You say gold? Oh, gold. Yes, gold. Yes. Gold is a good one. What else? I got a couple of don't knows. Gold, but so copper, not mineral water. So mineral resources, gold is a really good one. Coal's another really good one. Silver, specifically gold and silver. But when it's mineral, think stuff that you have to dig out of the ground. So mineral resources, they're a type of raw material, but they're stuff you got to dig out of the ground. Diamonds is good. Coal is good. Silver, gold, things like that, right? So we're finding these things in the West, mineral resources, right? Not necessarily everything on that list, but we're finding that type of material, right? So it's not just lumber, right? It's not just farming land. It's literal mineral resources, things you can find. And then on top of all these things, the government's going to be promoting economic growth. They're going to have policies and legislation, right, which are laws that are going to create new communities and new centers of commercial activity. You're going to get, when horses are $15, yeah, you're not wrong. But you're going to get whole cities and towns and states even, and entire regions that are going to be making their money during this era. Towns like San Francisco, St. Louis, Salt Lake City, even in Texas, places like Austin and San Antonio are going to get a lot of their growth during this period because of things like railroads, because of things like really enticing laws that are beneficial to business and money making. And especially because of different little mini regional economies that are growing. So in Texas, does anybody know? And just quick, yes, I know this is it, or just a bunch of no's in the chat. You can spam the chat with no's if you don't know. What made places like San Antonio and Austin really wealthy during this period? What resource they used? No, this is before oil. That's a really good guess, though. Oil comes later. And again, if you don't know it, just put no so I can see where we're at, because this is a really random question I'm asking you. No? Okay. Seen a bunch of no's. Anybody? I'll give you a little bit just in case. It's not coal. It's not a mineral resource. It's not on this list, but it's something we're going to talk about tomorrow. I'll give you a hint. It's in agriculture. No. Oxygen, no. Not rice and beans. Cattle. So the answer is cattle, right? Cows. Burgers, pretty much pre-burgers, right? Moo. So that's funny. Moo. Cattle drives. They're going to be called cattle drives, and cattle ranchers. They're going to be whole like pre-highway highways where that's where the term cowboy comes from, or cowboys are going to be taking cows, ranch hands, up and down Texas, through Texas. That's where a lot of ranchers are. So that's where Texas makes their money. So I'm going to move on because I spent a lot of time on this key point. Don't write everything on this slide as usual, right? No. Do we need more time back there? Was I just rambling through it all? You need a little more time to get the key point? No? Okay, so we're going to keep going then. More time? Okay. Sorry. Going forward. I'll give you a quick minute. I'll stop blabbing so that way you guys can get that down. And then we'll move on to the next slide. Oh, you're talking to Brian. Okay, well, some people said more time anyways. Stop talking to Brian, by the way. We're in class. Brian, focus. Go about 30 more seconds, then we're going to move on. Also, at some point this week, I'm going to put out a poll on Teams when I figure out how to do it about whether or not you guys want more of the guided notes like we were doing during review. I'll let you know when I do that, but do me a favor when I do put it, make sure you vote on that, because if you want guided notes or don't want them and you don't vote on it, then you can't complain to me later because I want guided notes, because if like 3 people vote on it, it's not gonna work. So just make sure you vote on that when I put that up there. I'm seeing a couple of yeses in chat already. Okay. So like I said, this week I will put that up though to see where we're at, because some of you guys had told me you liked it better, and so we'll do that. All right, railroad developments. It's known as the Iron Horse. You don't really need to write that down, but that's just something you say. This image was taken at the place where the 2 railroads meet and where the Transcontinental Railroad is formed in Promontory, Utah. I said that super slow because I always mispronounce it, and I just mispronounced it there, so don't judge me. But this is where the first Transcontinental Railroad meets, right here. And it's where the Central Pacific, that's Central Pacific, and the Union Pacific Railroads met in the middle. And it's a railroad that went from east to west, right? This is the east, and it connected the entire west. Every town this railroad passed through became an awesome boom town. What a boom town is it's really popular during a really short period of time, and it makes a lot of money for a very short period of time. So Tombstone, Arizona was a boom town. While there was silver in the mines and while the railroads were running through, it was really popular, but now it's a tourist trap where people who like a movie from 1992 go to see it. Whereas like San Francisco was a boom town, but it sustained itself, right? And it's still a big city today. So what do you need on the slide? You need the names of the railroads. Central Pacific, west to east. Asian immigrants, Chinese, built it. Put that in parentheses, built it. And then the Union Pacific, east to west. European immigrants, Irish and German, built it, right? So you need to add that they built it. And this about the date and Utah, Promontory, Utah, 1869. This is what you need right here. And then the significance. You get more people living along the Great Plains. Why? That's a really good breakdown, Isaac, of the American sentiment, I guess you would say, right? But why is it that more people live on the Great Plains now that there's a Transcontinental Railroad built? Somebody just really quick, tell me why. Why are more people living there? The Great Plains didn't change. What did change though? Because the Great Plains aren't what changed. The Great Plains are still there. They're still empty, plain, a lot of dirt. During this time, there's still a good amount of buffalo. Why are more people living there now? What's the difference now that the railroad is built? You can put it in chat. You can come off mute and say it. What's the difference post-railroad in the Great Plains? Faster, Brian, you're right. It's faster travel, but not just faster, it's easier. So travel is faster and easier. So therefore, more people are able to get to these places. It's really just that simple. It's easier for people to get there. More people get there. They want to live there. Every single city, like basically wherever this railroad line stops, a city is going to grow there. And where that city grows, trade grows. That's a given. But I'm just explaining that little line out. I'll give you about a minute and a half to get the info on this slide, and then we're going to move on to the next one. If you need more time than that, let me know. That should be a good amount of time. So, because we've spent a lot of time talking about railroads, but now we're actually getting into the transcontinental railroads, which we'll have, I believe, when all is said and done, something like 3 or 4. Wyoming isn't real. It is real. It's just not a place a lot of people. I think their population density is tiny. I think they have like 2 electoral votes in all of Wyoming. That's my secondary state, though. If I ever leave Texas, you guys can find me in Wyoming. Yeah, Yellowstone Park does dip into there. All are like, yeah. Wyoming's pretty cool. They got some cool wildlife out there. They got a lot of antelope. Just walk around. Stuff that's been there since this time period and even before. Who wants to look at Yellowstone? That's funny. About 20 seconds, and we're moving on. All right. So, key point 2. After the Civil War, government subsidies for transportation and communication systems helped open new markets in North America. So this slide pretty much stands on its own, so you need to write this down. But what does that mean? Can we go back real quick? Yes, really quick. I'll give you about 10, 12 seconds. Grab a screenshot, and then we're going to move forward. Again, you really just needed that bottom section, the middle and the bottom on here. Okay, so following the Civil War, the government subsidized, which means they kind of helped pay for, right? They wanted to pay for transportation and communication systems. They realized that these are the ways of the future. You want to have a powerful, futuristic, modern country. You need transportation infrastructure and communication infrastructure. Now, the communication was what? It's not cell phone towers. What were they building? Anybody remember? This is like during the Civil War. What did the North have that the South didn't, that now we're trying to build everywhere? For communication. Got to remember this one. I know it's been a while, but it hasn't been that long. You can send it privately. You can send it in chat. You can send it. You can come up here and say it. What communication system? You got to remember this little stuff because it matters. And if you don't remember, but I don't remember. You spent the entire Christmas break forgetting everything we talked about. What was it? So again, what communication systems? I don't know if that's a good plan, Isaac, but the question is what communication systems are being used? What are they talking about? Yes, Zach, telegraph, solid. So the telegraph is what you're using, right? That's what they're building. So next question. So those of you that missed this one, get ready for this one. This one's important. And this one you're going to write in your notes. So send me the answer to this privately, and I'm going to give you a minute. So this is in academic words, what's on the key point, right? Open new markets in North America. What does that mean? What does open new markets in North America mean? What are they talking about when they say new markets? Send it to me privately in the chat. I need everybody to send it to me. And then I'm going to put it publicly in the chat, and that's what you write in your notes. What does this mean in your own words? Again, 1 minute. So take the time and really think about it. I need to see responses from everybody. Minute and a half. What does this mean in your own words? Go. About a minute left. I'm seeing some responses. Remember, I need to see one from everybody. So remember, basically what I'm asking you for is, what does this mean in your own words? So I'm responding to some of you as you put in. You got about, I'll give you another 30 seconds because I've only seen a couple of responses. Try to put it in your own words, and if you're really struggling, tell me, but you shouldn't be, because this is pretty straightforward stuff. Let me see. I lost where I was. Give me a second. So I'm seeing a lot of responses. Some of you guys are doing really good. Some of you guys are right on the money. Some of you a little bit after. So time is about up. So those of you who participated, thank you for that. We're going to go ahead and move forward. And I'm going to put in the chat, public for everybody, what this is. So what this is talking about. After the Civil War, somebody put like the economy gets better. Yes, it gets better. Why? Well, because the government wants transportation, right? They want that built. And how do you build it? You build railroads, canals, right? Things like that. And they want communication systems, telegraphs, electricity. So what you get are new types of business, new markets in North America opening, right? Pre-Civil War, there wasn't a lot of money in saying, oh, I'm a telegraph builder, right? Or I'm a railroad builder. There was some money in it. But post-Civil War, whole markets of like, oh, I don't build railroads, but I build the spikes that railroads use, right? And now that guy is making money. Or I don't build telegraphs, but I make the little metal caps that go on the little handle that they press down, right? Like, does that make sense to you guys, what I'm saying, right? Like all these new businesses and strategies and economic markets essentially will grow and develop during this period because there's so much money in the overall big stuff. Does that make sense? Yes, no, or did I just confuse everybody? Just really quick, let me know if I confused everybody or not. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of makes sense. Okay, I'm going to put in the chat again what you should be typing out. Can I repeat what I said? I am going to repeat it, and I'm going to put it in the chat. So give me 1 second, and then I'll repeat it. So what I just put in the chat, and everybody should be able to see it. After the Civil War, new businesses and economic opportunities developed in the fields of communication, telegraphs, and transportation, railroads, right? And again, what that means, why it says new markets in North America. Yes, write down what I put in the chat. That's essentially what you need to add in there. In North America, now you have all these new business types, all these new business opportunities. You don't have to just own a textile mill anymore, right? Now you can make railroad spikes, or you can make pickaxes and sell them to railroad companies, or you can make telegraph wires, not even the poles, or not even building them, just making the wire, the copper wire that they use. You can be in all sorts of new business types that are available because after the Civil War, the US government is looking to spend money on these things. So you have all these new business types coming up. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, somebody needs to tell me before we move on, because we're about to move on. I'm taking a little long on this, but because it's important to set up why the US is going to change so much. The US that you see now, or at least most of what you see now, is really starting to take shape during this period. This is where you're going to see the US shift. There's no more of that Thomas Jefferson, everybody should be a farmer and on their own. We're going to talk about why, because it happens here. But there's no more of that stuff, right? You get more into the business and, you know, industry and captains of industry and all that stuff, robber barons and all of that stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, if it doesn't, you got to let me know. You gotta let me know. Send me a private message and I'll try to explain it a different way. But now I'm going to move on from this key point because we've been on here forever. So before you write any of this, I only want you to write down Homestead Act of 1862, Railway Acts, and significance. Skip moral, because I think we already talked about moral. And if we didn't, I'm going to put it in Quizlet at the end of the week anyways, so you can get it again there. So skip it for now because we're short on time. Homestead Act of 1862, Railway Acts of 1862 and 64, and then the significance of what they did. I'm going to start a timer for 2.5 minutes, and I'm going to do something I don't really like doing. I'm going to explain while giving you time to write because we're running low on time. So the Homestead Act. What this did was it basically gave away 160-acre plots of land to people who wanted them in areas specifically in like the Great Plains, like Iowa, Nebraska. I believe Wyoming, we were just talking about Wyoming, is another like state in that nature. All you had to do was be willing to live there for 5 years, and you had to live there for 5 years. And you had to file this application to live there for 5 years and work on the land. Like it's in your contract that you're working on the land. You got to build a house. You have to maybe farm it or ranch it or something, but you're going to improve the land. It is in there because there's a lot of weird little stipulations, but it's mainly around that. You got to improve the land you're going to live, they're going to give you, and you have to live there for 5 years. So for example, like I just bought a house, right? I keep talking about it, huh? Who would have guessed? But I had to sign a contract that said that that is going to be where I'm going to live. And if I move out of there within 3 years, I think I have to pay like some fee because that's what I signed in the contract. But I also had to make like swear like a legal oath that said, this is where I live. Like this is my primary residence. So there's all sorts of weird things you got to do when you're buying land. And these people were being given land, and a lot of it, 160 acres, or at least sounds like a lot. It really isn't, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And they had to live there for 5 years. They had to improve the land. That's the basics of it. So that's the Homestead Act. That's really important. So that's actually, you make that Red Dead reference. That's after this period, but the whole, that property, believe it or not, when you look at it, if you look at it, is probably a failed homestead. That the reason John Morrison's able to buy Beecher's Hope is probably because whoever bought it before realized that it was a bad homestead, because there's a bunch of bad homesteads because they just picked a random plot of land and gave it to you. And not all land is created equal, right? Some land's really good for farming, some land is bad for farming, so on and so forth. But Beecher's Hope is a homestead, right? And that's what these were called. That's why if you ever heard like, oh, I'm going back to the homestead, right? If you're, watching a movie or playing a video game or something, that's why it was the Homestead Act. So next, Railway Acts. What did they do? Central Pacific and Union Pacific contracted for more transcontinental railway and telegraph systems. Basically, the government is paying people, I ran out of time, or not people, but companies, major joint stock companies, to build railroad lines, wow, and telegraph lines. This gave citizens and businesses incentives to cultivate the West. Why are so many people moving west? Well, one, they can for the first time really easily. And two, because there's all these government incentives for them to do so. Oh, the government will just give you land if you agree to move west, right? Oh, the government's going to just pay your company to build railroads out west. It's the government's paying for it. Now, that doesn't mean it was easy, and we're going to talk about the trials, I guess, or difficulties of that in a bit. Coming up next, actually. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds just to wrap up because I took a little longer. So I brought it up. Yeah. Beecher's Hope is an example of probably a failed homestead. Isaac, it's a good reference. Yeah, those games are really good at historical stuff, actually. It's one of my favorite parts about them. All right, we're going to move forward now. If you need this, grab a screenshot of it really quick. All right. Challenges. So there's a bunch of challenges in the West, and you can summarize these on your notes. Pick the ones you want in there, or pick the, leave out the ones you don't. But you need to point out the challenges because this was not given. Some of you might have thought 160 acres of free land, that's probably too good to be true. It kind of was. Not that you wouldn't get the land or that the government would take it from you, but the challenges of the life that you're living when you agree to do that is very, very high. So not all land's created equal. I mentioned that earlier, right? Farming is hard to do in the Great Plains in certain areas. Some places, sometimes you'd get to your homestead and it looked like Beecher's Hope. It's a big deserty looking thing with a bunch of hills. And you're like, how am I going to grow stuff here? Guess what? You couldn't. There's a lack of lumber generally. So you had things called soddies being built, which were sod homes, which is literally a brick made of compacted dirt and water. And that's a soddy back there. And it was kind of built into the side, and it was very rough living. It's not a traditional home made of lumber and wood and stuff. And it was, these things all fell apart. And I don't even know if there's any left. I'm sure a Google search will show you some that are in color, but it's going to be hard to find original ones. They don't last long. They're not comfortable to live in. It's rough, soddies. There was natural disasters, floods, droughts, fires, all sorts of stuff. Great Plains. Dust Bowl, the Great Dust Bowl, we'll talk about that during the Great Depression, was also good. And of course, conflict with neighbors was also an issue in the Great Plains. There are man-made challenges, cycles of debt. Does anybody remember that cycle of debt we talked about during Reconstruction? Yes, no. I need some yeses or nos quick. A yes would be what it's called. It was done in the South mostly, and it affected a lot of poor whites and freed slaves. I got crickets. Anybody remember? Come on now. And if you don't remember, that's fine, but just tell me no. That system, it had a name. It was a system of debt. Jonathan, if you remember it, go. You can unmute. Tell me.
I know what you're talking about, sir, but I don't remember the name of the system specifically.
You don't remember the name? Okay. Alex got it. Sharecropping. Yeah, sharecropping. All right. So sharecropping is a very specific cycle of debt system, right? So hopefully you guys remembered that name now, right? A quick reference, I'm sure. I get it, guys. It's been a few weeks. We're getting back into the swing of things. Sharecropping is an example of a debt cycle. And it's not so much that there's sharecropping in the West, but there are rigged systems like sharecropping in the West. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. And if it doesn't, let me know. But so it's not that sharecropping's out there, but there's rigged systems like that out there. So bonanza farms, massive single crop farms, go big or go home. Basically put all your stuff into one basket and hope it pays out. And a lot of times it didn't. And if it didn't, you were out of money, out of resources, out of everything, and you were stuck, broke. And then railroad exploitation. I'm sure you guys know this. Maybe you don't. I'm sure you do, right? Big businesses don't really care about people. They care about making money. And the railroads are the first examples of big business in the United States. And what you will see is that people needed the railroads for everything back then. There's no cars, there's no planes, there's no other ways to get around. And the railroads will use that to their advantage. They will make the prices unfair. They will charge people an arm and a leg. Kind of like how, Amazon is always free shipping. Imagine if Amazon charged you like triple for shipping for everything because they could, because they're Amazon. That's what the railroads were doing. Instead of like making it easier for the consumer, they were making it harder for the consumer. And the railroad's going to be able to do that for a long time. It's not going to be till Teddy Roosevelt takes office that he changes some of that stuff. So what do you need to know from all this? Again, you should have summarized some of the challenges and the significance. Life is very difficult out west. The vast majority of people that went out west did not succeed. They failed. Despite it sounding like a really good idea on paper, it almost I don't want to say it almost never worked out, but it very often didn't work out. So just get that down. I'll give you a quick minute and change, and then we'll move on. Give you about a minute and 20 on that one. That's actually a really good analogy to make, like migrating to the US. It's a lot like that. Like being like a modern day migrating to the US, or even back then, right? If you're coming from somewhere new, that's basically what a lot of these people are doing. They're selling everything they have out east. They're selling their house. They're selling all their stuff, and they're getting a homestead, and they're buying the necessary stuff. Like, I don't remember the numbers. There's a specific price. I think it's like $4,000 or $5,000, something like that. I forget the price. I don't want to say it. Don't write a number down because I forget the number. But there's a price, and you buy that wagon that has all the stuff that you need to make the trip out west. Like, yes, it's a lot like migrating to the US from another country. People are giving up everything they got in the East to try to make it out west, because there's this hope, this theory, this idea that there's all this opportunity, and there is to an extent, but it's very difficult to make it. And a lot of people don't. Kind of like with people that migrate to the United States. It's very difficult. Not everybody makes it. Some people do. That's a really good analogy. That's something you could use like in an LEQ or a DBQ, making that connection. In fact, I'm going to check. There might be one in there. Okay, so let's move forward. Key point 3. Improvements in mechanization helped agricultural production increase substantially and contributed to declines in food prices. I'll give you a quick minute for that one, and we'll talk about it on the next slide. Mechanization. Not like robots, but mechanical machines. Less handwork, more machine power. Less human power, more machine power. Things like the steel plow, the mechanical reaper, barbed wire. Uh, 30 seconds. Again, mechanical innovations. All right, let's go to move forward. Agriculture advances. So this is really brief. All you need is technological innovations make easier and more sustainable farming methods for farming. Farming becomes easier, cheaper, and better. You become more efficient. Farming becomes more efficient. Alyssa, thank you for letting me know. If you want to let her know that I'll have the video up this afternoon, she can get what she missed there. So again, farming becomes easier and more efficient. It's way easier to farm. It's more efficient, which means you're putting in less hours, but getting more crops, right? So if you used to work all day, 9-10 hours in the field, and you'd get like, I don't know, 30 bags of maize. Well, with the machines you now have access to as a large scale farmer, you put in 6 hours in the field and you get like 100 bags of maize, right? You get like, you clear the whole field. So because of these innovations, which we've talked about in the past, like when we talk about industrialization, we talked about them. Farming is easier, cheaper, and more efficient than it ever has been. So you get a surplus of food and you get a decrease in food prices. So food becomes cheaper and we get a surplus. So that's good for most people, but who's it bad for? Food getting cheaper is bad for who? Because it's bad for somebody. That sounds good for everybody. Who's it probably bad for? And again, you don't need all of this word per word. You just need to know that farming is getting easier. It's bad for farmers, right? And very specifically, now not all farmers, food providers, yeah. So it's bad for farmers, but it's specifically bad for small scale farmers, right? Remember yeoman farmers, right? The idea of a farmer that can sustain themselves, feed themselves, and then, make a little cash on the side. It's especially bad for yeoman farmers. Like the yeoman farmer idea, this is where it's going to go to die, because food's going to get so cheap that it's going to be next to impossible to make money off of a small farm, right? That's part of why those homestead 160-acre plots aren't good enough, because they're not big enough to sustain like a farmer that needs to make all X amount of money. His grain or his product is worth way less now. So these new innovations are really good for large scale farming. It's really good for general people that don't farm for a living. But for the yeoman farmer, it gets really difficult. Barbed wire, for example, I have that up there because it's going to help ranchers. So we'll get into all that and stuff, when we get in tomorrow, when we talk about the culture and society. But so again, I'm going to leave this up for another 30 seconds. Easy production, more efficient production makes farming easier and cheaper. Food gets cheaper, and there is a surplus of it. We have extra. We have so much. So that's a good thing, right? Farming goes up, it gets easier, but it's bad for some farmers. And that's where those debt cycles come from. That's where the bonanza farms come into place. All that stuff starts to form because it's not easy to be a homesteader out there on your land when you can't make any money off of it. About 30 more seconds, and we're going to move on. If any of you guys have ever fallen into a barbed wire fence, you can thank J.F. Glidden for it. He's the guy that invented barbed wire to keep in your cattle. Just realized you guys probably haven't fallen into, but that's not a thing a lot of people fall back into. It's actually part of why Texas, where do I thank him? Yeah, write him a letter. Maybe he'll respond. It's actually probably why Texas became so popular. That's why cattle farming ranchers became such things, because barbed wire. It allowed people to fence in their farms. It's where whole cattle production comes from that stuff. Without him, you wouldn't have that. So I don't know if we should make him not make it, but it's definitely, he's who you got to thank if you've ever brushed with some barbed wire, because that stuff's not fun. Many farmers responded to increasing consolidation in agricultural markets and dependence on the evolving railroad system by creating local and regional cooperative organizations. Yeah, so it's not that people are going to take the cows, it's that the cows would wander off. People. It depends on what you mean by laws. If you mean like legislation, it's not so much that the law itself is in people's hands, but it's that in theory, the power of the government is supposed to be in the hands of the people. So a whole bag of worms are not going to open. But that's a good thought. That's a good debate club topic. Okay. So what do you need for this key point? It's a big jumbled educational mess of words just for cattle rustlers. Basically, agriculture is in a dangerous place, right? It's hard for farmers out there. So in response, they start to group up regionally, locally, forming different organizations that are meant to help them. So, but yeah, so there are cattle rustlers. That is a thing, people that steal cattle, but that's during this time period. Pre-time period, why the barbed wire is such a big deal is because there was no effective way, quick and easy way to fence in your ranch. They just got hanged. Yeah, they did get hung for it. Cattle rustlers did not, they got caught, of course. That was you didn't want to be a cattle rustler. It's rough back then. It's kind of like horse stealing. And guys, cattle rustlers, by the way, are just people who would steal cows. But that was we'll get into all that culture of the West stuff tomorrow. This is more just like the economic foundation for it. Same with horse thieves. Yes, horse thieves would also be killed, just like cattle rustlers. Because again, if you steal a cow, that's stealing somebody's livelihood back then. It's not like taking a car now where in theory you could still do your job. But like that was how families lived back then. It's how little towns lived, even the local cows. So it was a bigger deal back then. All right, about 30 more seconds and we're going to move on. I believe this is the last slide coming up. Let me double check. I lied. We got 2 more slides and we've got about 10 more minutes. So we should have just enough time to finish. Someone's livelihood. Yeah, that wouldn't be good, destroying somebody's livelihood. It happened though. By the way, I just realized I hadn't posted the slides. Not wrestling, rustling. So it's like with an R. No, rustling. So it's like RUSTLING, rustling. Yeah. And it's a cattle rustler and they're stealing cattle. That's what they're doing. The person was known as a cattle rustler. Yeah, Russ Isaac just put in chat, Russell. I actually don't know where the name comes from. If in case anybody's wondering, I have no idea. I just know that's what they're called. All right, so let's move forward. Farmers and their early struggles. Oh boy. So you got something called the Granger movement. It was designed as a safe space for farmers. It taught people organization, how to vote for legislatures that'll support them. Right. So the Granger movement was like a pro-farmer movement. Had things like the Farmers Alliance, which educated communities about farming finance, interest rates, predatory lending. Hey, don't borrow money from that person because they're out to get you, right? Their lending system is rigged. Granger laws designed to regulate crop transport and storage prices, among other miscellaneous fees. Oh, Isaac, thank you for that information. Yeah, so rustle means to round up and steal. Yeah, so then that's why they would be called cattle rustlers. They were literally doing that. Good info. Thank you, Isaac. So you guys, you learn something every day. You do need pretty much all of this info, specifically the movement and the alliance. And then for the laws, you can include it in Granger movement. Just put created laws that regulated crop transport and storage. So that way it was the same for everybody. Because what would happen is if you were selling, I don't know, wheat in Wyoming, maybe your price was, I don't know, you had a certain price you'd pay, right? Let's say you negotiated, it was $3 to transport every ton of wheat that you sold. But if you lived in Iowa, maybe you were paying $12. And it was unfair and it wasn't cool. So the Granger laws were set up to regulate that price. So it was everybody pays $6, right? Something like that. That's the point of that system. That's the point of those laws. So again, quick minute and a half. If you're going to need more time than that, please grab a screenshot when we run low on time, because we got one more slide and I want to make sure we have time for the exit ticket. It is a straightforward, easy exit ticket today. Later on, we will talk about how we're going to be doing the, not new stuff, but we're going to be doing some stuff. We'll talk about it later, though. For now, straightforward, easy exit ticket in about 45 seconds. All right, about 20 seconds, and we're going to move on. So if you need more time than this, let me know. All right, going to move forward now. Get into the last slide that we have today. Major court cases. All you need to do is write down the names of the court cases. Munn versus Illinois allowed the state to regulate industries that affected the common good, in quotes, right? Love when the common good is brought into play. Upheld Granger laws and other measures against railroad companies. Then you have Wabash versus Illinois. States could not set rates on interstate commerce, which means that the states cannot set a rate between state to state payments. So basically, if you're buying something online and they're selling it to you in California and you're in Texas and you're trying to buy something and the prices are different, the states can't set that. Congress will pass the Interstate Commerce Act of 1887, which failed to regulate railroad rates. Would not. So basically, what it says there on the bottom would not have much power till. The government is not going to have much power in statements in stopping these railroads until Teddy Roosevelt takes office. And the reason why is because Teddy Roosevelt's going to be the guy that breaks all the trusts. He's going to be the one that fights big business and corporations. Like I have a couple of really funny like Teddy Roosevelt memes that are about stuff like that you'll see in the slides later on when we get to Teddy Roosevelt. But he's the one that's going to kind of fight the railroads and fight the big businesses of the time, like JP Morgan and all of these groups that he's going to make sure that they don't have monopolies and all that stuff. He's going to be the guy that protects the little guy from big business. But until he gets there, the federal government's not going to have much power over these railroads. They're going to keep charging farmers whatever they want, and they're going to keep getting away with it. Farmers continue to be victims of industrial and financial institutions. And it's not just railroads, by the way. Like, you got to remember, if you're a farmer and you farm all day, you don't have time or the resources to make your own goods, like furniture, for example, right, for your house, or tools. So you buy those things. And even those companies are starting to get one over on farmers. So it's going to be real rough for farmers for a while. And it's not until, like I said, Teddy Roosevelt. It's going to be till Teddy Roosevelt becomes president. And that is a ways from here. He's president in the later times. So that is the last slide. I'll leave it up for another minute. So if we need more time than that, grab a screenshot, and then we're going to move on to the exit ticket. When you finish this slide, the exit ticket is already in Google Classroom, but I'm going to go over it in a minute. So do not leave the call. Stay on here. $30 seconds. About 10 seconds. Make sure you got what you need. And then we're going to move forward. Talk about the exit ticket. Okay, so exit ticket coming up. Here it is. This is a really straightforward, easy exit ticket. Like, it really is. All you got to do is put in the response. I'll have it up for you. It's up till 5, like always. Identify and explain why construction of the Continental Railroad impacted westward expansion. I want you to be specific and give full sentence examples. Treat it like an SAQ. Be specific. Identify and explain why federal legislation impacted westward expansion. Give me specific examples in each one of these responses. This is not like an ABC. This is like 3 mini SAQs that are only one, but take them seriously and answer them fully. Because I'm noticing lack of details in responses like on your semester exams, and that hurt a good chunk of you. So keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share. I'm going to stop the recording.